Heard this read a lot of times. You go down the street, you see manger scenes, you see ours. You probably have one in your living room. Nativity scenes are all over the place, and we don't think a whole lot about this. But we need to question things. And you need, first of all, what's a magi? Well, from magi we get the word magic. And these guys weren't magicians, but they were very learned scientists of the age. And they knew about stars. They knew about, I don't think they knew about rotation of the earth or anything like that, but they certainly knew about stars. And they noticed that there was a different view of stars depending on the season of the year and so forth. And they followed stars, and they understood stars, and they were astrologists. They weren't astrologists who were interested in sorcery or anything like that, but they were very learned scientists. And they were curious men. And they were wealthy men. And they were from Persia, which, I don't know if you know this, but it's on the other side of the, it's across that little sea, I forget what it is, from Saudi Arabia. It's sort of over toward Pakistan, okay? It's 1,200 miles from Israel. And the question I had in my mind, if I read this for the first time, is what are these guys, what interest do they have in this remote little country where there's this insignificant king that was supposed to be born? What drives them, what causes them to want to go all this way and visit this baby? And the answer is short. The answer is just pretty short. The answer is they read. They were readers. They were investigators. They did research. And what they saw was, in their country, there would have been a legendary prophet who told their king and the king of Babylonia, two kings of Babylonia. Let's see, you had Nebuchadnezzar and you had Belshazzar, and then you had in their country, in the Persian kings, you had the great king Darius and Cyrus. Okay, if you read your history books, you would have known that much of the Middle East was conquered by these kings. Eventually, they went over to Greece and they were defeated at Thermopylae. Okay, by a Greek. The Greeks finally united and they beat them there, and they drove them back, and there was never. But they had an army of 1 million men, and again, they didn't go any further than Greece, but they had a formidable army. But at this time, some of you, I'm sure, know the story of Daniel. He was captured as a young boy. He was Clayton's age, and he was captured, and he was brought to a foreign country. He was brought east, and he spent most of his life in Babylon. Now, Babylonian kings, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, he served in their court, okay? Also Cyrus and Darius. And he served in their courts. And so they knew him, and they called on him, and he was an extraordinary prophet. He was an extraordinary prophet. So, knowing that, we realize that these kings, they weren't kings, by the way, the Magi were not kings. We say we three kings. First of all, there weren't three. We're not, well, there may have been three, but we're not sure there were three. We just know there were 3 gifts. There might have been 2 kings, as few as 2. There might have been as many as a dozen. But they weren't kings, they were magi. They were more like our university professors. Okay? That would have been the best way to describe it. And they read, and they read the history of their country, and they probably read Daniel's books, and they probably read accounts of Daniel by other writers, okay? So they poured through this thing, and they got to a scripture, okay, in Daniel, which talked about the time when Jesus would come, okay? Now, if you look in this scripture we have, do you have the Daniel scripture? let's read this together. 70 sevens are decreed for your people and for your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. This is prophecy. Prophecy of the 70 weeks. It doesn't refer to a year and a half. It refers to 70 weeks of years. And if you do your math, you got 490 years, okay? And if you go, and I'm not going to go through all this in detail, but they use years, prophetic years and so forth, and it's kind of a complex calculation. But long story short, if you go from the time that the temple was rebuilt, and they knew when that was, because a guy named Nehemiah and another fellow named Zerubbabel went back and restored the temple in Jerusalem. And they know when that happened because if you look at the book of Nehemiah, he begged the king, I don't forget which one it was, probably Darius, to go to give him passage and to give him lumber and all kinds of things to get back to Jerusalem and build his temple, because he was not feeling well. He was just upset because the gates of the temple, the gates of the city were being torn down, and raiders were coming in, bandits and so forth. They're just raiding the city. Nobody had any safety. So he wanted to rebuild the gates, the wall, and the temple. Okay? So that happened. And they know exactly when that was, and if you go back and you add all these years up, it lands right on the day of Passover. And Jesus died. Passover of the year that Jesus died. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so they knew that that was coming up, okay? And interesting thing happened. Along with that prophecy came a star. And these guys are astrologers, and they watch stars. And suddenly, they see this star, and they think, oh my goodness, we need to get on our camels and go visit this guy. Go back to that scripture, Mary, if you would. Because what kind of a guy is this? I lost my pool cue. Oh, here it is. What kind of a man is this that they read about? They read their scripture. He's going to finish transgression. He's going to put an end to sin. He's going to atone for wickedness. He's going to bring everlasting righteousness. He's going to seal up vision and prophecy and anoint the most holy place. No one understands. And so it tells the time. The anointed one, the ruler, comes. And it will be rebuilt. Okay. So all this is going to happen. They see this and they do their math and they think, well, this isn't quite yet, but there's this star here. There's this weird star at this weird time, and it's kind of moving on us. Maybe we better go. And so they pack up their camels and they hire their assistants, and there's a caravan of guys going. I mean, it's not a minor thing for somebody to travel 1,200 miles in those days. Maybe you can go 20 miles a day. So they would have gone at least 60 days if it's roughly 1,200 miles. And that's, by the way the crow flies, I just used a ruler to measure the distance, on the map. But, it could have been 3 months. We have no idea. But at any rate, they take off, they get their camels, they get their provisions, they find somebody else to work their jobs at the university. I have no idea. And they just leave. Their wives and their kids and everything are probably wondering what the heck's going on here. These guys just took off on us. What kind of dads are these? And so they go. And And they get there, of course, you know the story. They talk to King Herod, and he wants them to find the Jesus so he can kill the baby Jesus. And they go back. They pay homage. And this is kind of an unusual thing. You see, these guys were not Jews. They were not Jews. They say they were probably followers of Zoroaster. At least most of the people were in those days, in that era, in that place. And they had no connection with these Jews. So when they showed up, they were kind of lost. But the star still guided them, and they found the place where this king was. This amazing, wonderful king was, and they're probably a little surprised, you know, a kind of a humble place. Now, they did not see him in a barn, because at this time, he had moved. And Mary, we need to go back to, Matthew 2:11. No, you don't have 2:11, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't give you that. That's my fault. But if you go in 2:11, Matthew 2:11, it talks about where they saw him, okay? Jesus was living in a house. If you go to Matthew 2:11. By the time the Magi got to Jesus, he was no longer in a stable. And his earthly father, Joseph, was not there. He was not mentioned. So, if any of you have manger scenes at home, and I know many of you do, you need to change it, okay, in order to get it right. I mean, if you want to be correct about this, if you got the shepherds there, and you got a baby in swaddling clothes, you're going to have to take the wise men and put them in the bedroom, okay? Because they and their camels haven't arrived yet. They don't arrive at the same time the shepherds do, okay? And then you're going to have the kids say, okay, we're going to move the kings in here. They're not kings, by the way, they're magi. Move the magi in here with the camels and with the gifts. And then we're going to have to move these shepherds out to the hills and move Joseph out to the workshop. And we're going to have to take this little baby Jesus and make him a little kid who's running around, because he's probably a year or two old by now. Okay, we're not sure how old, but probably less than 2, because King Herod had all the babies under 2 killed. So he's probably 1 to 2 years old, maybe 6 months, we don't know. But at any rate, he's probably not lying in this manger anymore. He probably crawled out and said, "It's cold in here, Mom." Or didn't say anything, but he would have been moving, you know. He would have been a little baby boy, toddler, okay? So when the kings came, that's who they saw, and Mary's with them, and Joseph's out working overtime somewhere, because they might have another kid by now. They had 5 kids, okay? At least 5. Because we know that James and Jude were brothers of Jesus, and talked about his sisters and brothers, so he could have had he would have had at least 4 siblings, okay? So Joseph was a worker. And so they visit him, and they bring these gifts. Interesting gifts. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, you know, picture in my mind Mary kind of hanging out with her friends, having coffee, and, you know, or maybe I don't see her leaving the house, you know, with little babies running around, but then maybe they drop over and they're talking about gifts, you know. Well, my little Yenta, she got this beautiful blanket. You know, it was wrapped up and it was made into a little doll, you know. It's just so cute, and you just wouldn't believe it. And then the other mom says, "Oh, and my son Yitzhak, he got this bathtub from his grandpa. You know, it was really neat. It was carved out of ruins, you know, from a pillar. When we had our last earthquake, remember that over there in Beth Shean? Yeah, and they rolled this piece of pillar over, and they carved it out. It took him 3 months to do this. What a wonderful gift that's been. And then, Mary, what'd you get when Jesus was born? Well, we were down in Bethlehem, and, you know, Mom and Dad were up in Nazareth, which is 70, 80 miles north of here, and so they couldn't be here, so we didn't get anything from Grandma and Grandpa. But these 3 magi show up from Persia. We couldn't even understand what they were saying hardly, because they speak kind of a different language. And it was really weird. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then I hear a heavy silence, you know. These women are thinking, what the heck? That's the weirdest thing. And, you know, Mary says, well, you know, it may seem like kind of strange gifts, but at least it's lighter going to Egypt with that than with a bathtub, you know. So, anyway, those things had to be a little bit strange for people to be discussing their children getting as gifts. Gold, of course, is something you give to royalty. Gold is a royal metal. And if you read about the temple or about the tabernacle, everything was lined in gold, you know, because God was present there. So Jesus got gold. And it's probably a practical gift because they had to make a quick trip to Egypt. You know, they had to get up and go. And they had to leave their country. And they had to leave all their friends and family and go to Egypt to escape the persecution by Herod. He killed all these other babies. Jesus was spared. Joseph, we're not sure when he died. We know that Mary was a widow. That gold was probably important. We know that Jesus, he wasn't a young man. He was 30 years old when he started his ministry. But he probably could have used some of the gold just to live, to keep his disciples alive. So, important gift. Provided for by God. The other thing that he had was frankincense. And those of you who are raised Roman Catholic, Mike, you know what frankincense is. They have this censer, and they as a server, I used to have to light the charcoal, and it was really cool charcoal because you just light it, which it would kind of spark and would take off, and you wouldn't have to worry about like our charcoal that we have, and it just lit quickly. And then you would take a spoonful or 2 or 3 of this frankincense, and you put it on the charcoal, and it would start to smoke up, and it would have this sweet smoke. Like a lot of incense, maybe you smell incense. And they would take that censer and they would go around the communion host, which they says God is in that, okay? So they use that in the Catholic Church today. And they used it back in Jewish times. They burned incense. And the whole tabernacle, the whole temple would be filled with this incense, and it would indicate the presence of God. So it was something that a priest would get. Gold was for a king. Frankincense was for a priest. Myrrh. Myrrh is a gift that they give to somebody who's contemplating death. Now, myrrh is mixed with water, perhaps diluted a little bit, and you drink it if you've got indigestion. It's a good, has medicinal value, but myrrh also is also an embalming fluid, okay? In those days, they didn't drain you out and put formaldehyde in your veins. In those days, they just rubbed stuff on you. And myrrh was one of those things they'd rub on you so you wouldn't decay as badly, okay, when you died. So Jesus came to be a king, to be a priest, and to die for us. So the gifts that were given were especially appropriate. You know, I think about the long trip. I think about the expense of a pilgrimage. I think about people who have gone wherever. I mean, I know there's people who go to Israel. I went to Israel, and it was an expensive trip. It was well worth it. It certainly wasn't a 2 or 3 month trip. It certainly didn't require perhaps a dozen camels and servants and guards and all kinds of provisions, which is what these guys would have wanted, would have needed. It didn't require that I go through a difficult territory. I went on a long airplane ride, but it wasn't anything like these guys. But I believe when they left Jesus, it was, there was a change. In fact, I think there was a change in these guys before they left. Something inside them said, go, seek out the person of Jesus. And I believe that when we seek the person of Jesus, we will never, ever be disappointed. If we seek the person of Jesus Christ with all our mind and soul, it doesn't matter what neighborhoods we're going to go through. It doesn't matter what kind of difficulties we're going to encounter. We will not be disappointed. When we seek the person of Jesus with all our strength and with all our resources, it doesn't matter what kind of complexities we're going to encounter, like a different language or a place we've never been to. God lifts up stars to guide people. The GPS to arrive at Jesus will be provided. And if you all remember last week, there was a reference. We looked at the book of Numbers. Where do you have that book of Numbers? Scripture. This was written by a man named Balaam, who was not a Jew. And he said, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. Jacob is Israel, another word for Israel. Jacob had 12 sons. It was 12 tribes. Israel. And they renamed Jacob to Israel when he came to the Lord. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. The scepter is the ruling cane that he had. He will crush the foreheads of Moab and the skulls of the people of Sheth. Notice the word a star. A star came out of Israel. And these guys noticed the star. And if we look for signs, Jesus will provide the way so that we can seek him out. Some people say, I can't understand God. I don't get it. But if we seek the person of Jesus, that is the way to God. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. I am the star. He's a star of David, the star of Jacob. Follow the star. You will not be disappointed. Anybody who doesn't know Jesus, certainly this is a time when you can step forward and make a confession of faith. If you would like to make a commitment to this church, we would love to have you. If you have never in many years recommitted yourself, we would love to have you do that. So let's all stand.